Hey there, beautiful people. This is Gina Robinson, and you are listening to the Renew Podcast. You are in the right place and always welcome here. All right, ladies, welcome back to the Renew Podcast, and I'm here with my pastor and friend, Pastor Lauren.
Hi.
We are back. We're so excited. We were with you guys last time, and we talked about, I think, a pretty interesting topic. I have gotten, Lauren, feedback from running into people from that podcast, people messaging me going, "Oh my goodness, I needed to hear that today." And you really don't know what people are going through and how it touches on them in the right moment. But to remind you guys, in that episode, we talked about when you get a no, the rejections that we go through. And it could be life, relationships, job. And I think anybody can relate to that. Lauren shared a really powerful testimony of her growing up. And you talked about how you weren't the athlete.
Definitely not.
Her brother was.
Oh, star athlete.
Yeah, Lauren lived on the baseball field.
I was always John's sister.
Yes. But, talking about those things reminds us of where we've been and how much God is doing now and how he's used all those hard places. The Israelites would have called that the desert.
Oh, yeah.
And those are not fun times. But today we want to focus on, what do you do after the no? And what do you do when God doesn't fix it? And what I mean by that is we know God uses all things.
Yes.
And we read it in his word, but there are times where we question, like, God, I believe your word. I've been going through this for a long time. Even Pastor Miriam, when she shared her message over Mother's Day, going through the infertility and the loss, there are times where we actually are going, God, okay, you said no to that. What now? And we just want to talk about some practical steps on a daily basis if you're in that season. But we also want to talk about personal testimonies. And so Lauren and I can relate to a lot of different things in life. Our circumstances are different, but we may be praying for some of the same things. So I don't know what she's about to share with you guys. Guess what? It's going to be a surprise to me too. But just to reflect on some times where you've gotten the no and the rejection, and in that next season and maturing process, what are some things that you did that helped along the way?
Yeah. So when you shared with me kind of what we're going to be unpacking today, I was like, man, I think looking back when I was younger, I found that I put so much energy and just thought process into what I didn't get. And I spent so much time just pondering, going back through like just almost like a spiral type of thinking of, this didn't get answered, or God, I thought you said this, but this hasn't really panned out like I thought. And and when you said what we were talking about, I was like, man, I could go in so many different directions. Because the younger me definitely spent time and energy on things that just weren't fruitful. And it honestly didn't matter. And a real life, I guess, testimony of that would be about 8 years ago when my parents divorced. I spent so much time, so much energy, so much of my thoughts were consumed with them and what was going on with them. And when all of this was happening, I was in my 30s, I was married, I had kids. And what I found is I spent about a year of my life focusing so much on them and what I couldn't control in their marriage and what was happening and how I felt, that I had actually not spent time focusing on the right things, which was my own marriage, my own children, the things within my hula hoop, as we jokingly go back to that, the things within my hula hoop that I could control. And so what I found is I was distracted almost by the things that I had no control over. And I was almost neglecting the things that mattered the most. And so now, going through that 8 years ago, now being on the other side of it, what I have found is it's almost like I use, which Aaron would probably laugh because we've talked about this quite a bit lately, almost like a filter for me. So now when I come across things and it's either a season of disappointment, feeling rejected, not getting the answer I thought I was going to get, or things didn't turn out like I thought they were going to turn out. Now I kind of go through a filter of, is this one of the three things that's like the main event of my life? Meaning, is it impacting my relationship with Jesus? Is it impacting my marriage, or is it relating to my marriage, or is it impacting or in relationship with either of my children? Outside of those three things, I have learned the hard way to not spend so much energy on processing those things. Now, if they are within those three things, yes, I will go back to what I have learned about myself is when I do feel like I need to pull back, not in an unhealthy way.
Yeah.
But just in times of like processing and in prayer, I have found one of the things that's really worked well for me personally is I will go back to familiar passages of scripture or familiar worship songs. And I think the younger me would have gone to something new, like, God, I need to hear you. I need a new word.
Yeah.
I need something fresh. And now the older version of me is like, no, I want to go back to the familiar places where I know I've heard you speak before, where I know there's worship songs that I don't even have to think about the lyrics. I just know them so deep in my heart, because those are the times that I really can go back to him, and I'm not going back to him trying to figure something out. I'm just solely going back to him as like a well for my soul, just to get refreshed. And so that's what I have found for me that helps me almost like recalibrate and pretty much define how much time and energy I'm putting into something.
Yeah.
Just helps me keep things in perspective.
I think it's so good that you're talking about things. We spend most of our time processing and thinking about things that we can't control. And I think I think so many people are fixers more than they think.
I'm guilty.
I mean, because you know
So
how
guilty.
some people are like, well, I'm not a fixer, I am. And I'm thinking, really, who's not a fixer? I mean, no one wants to stay in a broken place or a broken situation. Like, I don't think anybody just signs up for that. But so getting out of something and making something better. But then there is a place where I know that Sharon personally, like when I remember a time where I was in this unhealthy place where my thinking had become so negative about healing and being healed of autoimmune, and anybody that tells you about autoimmune will say there's nothing that can heal that. You just have to manage it. And the way I know that God made me is that I don't even like hearing that, because I want to not just fix it, but how can we make that better? And that's totally out of my control. Like there's nothing. I've been to all the great doctors and spent lots of money, and there's things that have helped along the way to help manage some of the pain, but really the healing, I pray for healing still, but the healing's out of my hands. And it reminds me of Ruth, where she really surrendered not just her life, but surrendered probably things that she was hoping for. Or, like she gave up control. Like, God, I'm not going to give up on this dream, or I'm not going to give up on the fact that I know you can still heal or provide a husband or give me children. But these are what my heart's saying and I'm longing for, but I'm giving up control to you, which is the hardest thing for any mom, first of all, to say. Mamas out there at any season of raising children, whether they're in their 20s like mine or they're infants, to give control up, is so hard. But anyway, so talking about like the no with healing is that, most things that I I believe in miracles. I believe that God still heals. I believe that his word is true and real and alive. And I hear about people being healed all the time. But many times we get discouraged in the no or not now. And I like to use the word not now because I know God's timing is absolutely perfect and not on my time frame. But I also know I don't have a Bible in my hands right now, but if I did, I would say go to Hebrews 11 and hear about all the heroes of faith that never saw a lot of those things come to fruition in their lifetime. But once we're in the presence of Jesus, it won't matter anyway. As I said, all my questions will go away.
Yeah.
But they just lived day by day and went through all the things that we're going through and the daily stuff, still believing no matter what, So some practical things Lauren shared was, going back to those, it almost reminds me of going back to the wells.
Yeah.
Redigging the wells, going back to the things that you were thirsting for, that the Lord deposited in your soul and fed you. And so even I want to talk a little bit about the Israelites, when they were in the desert, they were fed and taken care of. It was not the situation. It was not a good situation. It was a long time. But when they were in that desert place, they were provided for. Their needs were provided for. And so I think a lot of times when we get the no or the rejection or whatever, we tend to focus on that instead of focusing on, all right, what can I do with the right now? If that, like in this moment, instead of trying to look so far ahead on what's going to happen in the future. And I'm preaching to myself here because if I feel like a lot of times if I have all the questions answered or all the thoughts in my mind that are swirling around, that the anxiety in me will dampen. And not would I only be more confident, but I would be in control.
The C word.
Yes. So none of that is good, by the way. But in human nature, that's just how we are. We feel like, the more we know, the more God can tell us, the more that's revealed to us. But really the testing of our faith is not knowing and really just enduring. And I feel like there was so much in that season of them being in the desert years, 70 years, like just being there and not, really struggling, but having their needs met and then coming out on the other side of that.
And even though they definitely did not leave an ideal situation. I mean, they were in slavery.
I know.
But so often they're like, we want to go back to Egypt. And I find myself saying similar things. I don't want to be stretched. I want to stay in the familiar, even if it's uncomfortable. Sometimes I find myself going back to I don't want to change. I don't want to grow in this area. I'd rather live in this situation than have to go somewhere that I don't know what's going to happen on the other side. So I have a lot of empathy for them. But as you're reading it, you're like, how could you say things like that? And then looking back, I'm like, I have mentally at least said those very same things so many times. I'm like, I feel like
many times.
Well, part of even with what you were saying as far as asking all the questions and wanting to find out all the information, I think a lot of that is human nature.
Yeah.
To when you get a diagnosis or when you find out things and wanting to know, or at least asking, all the questions. And I know for myself when, I'm trying to think how long it's been now. David's 9.
I can't believe it.
I know he'll be 10 in August, but so he was born, and then 3 days after that, I just woke up and couldn't hear out of the right side of my ear. And because, like most moms that you're dealing with newborns, you're trying to figure it out, but then you're also just trying to survive and get some sleep. So going through the process of going to different doctors and them saying, oh, it's just an ear infection, take some steroids, you'll be fine. And in my heart, it's like I knew it wasn't that, and not in a pessimistic kind of way.
Yeah.
It was almost like God was saying, like, that's not it, and buckle up because it's going to be different. And so, I did all the protocols that the doctors told me to go to, and then long story short, about a month after it initially happened, I went to a specialist, and he, which I can appreciate, he just had no bedside manner. And it was like, I did all the hearing tests. And so
You're like, what's
he brings
happening?
me and Aaron into a different room, and he's like, well, yeah, you have sudden hearing loss, and apart from a miracle, it's never coming back. And I was like, what?
Thank you for just,
I mean, it was very shocking. And so I remember going through all those questions of, oh my gosh. And at the time, because it was a sensory issue, I couldn't go into a loud restaurant or I would get headaches because all the noise would come through one ear. And I remember being in those moments thinking like, well, how am I ever going to do this? How am I ever going to manage this? How am I ever going to be confident enough to let Aaron travel again? Because I can't, if I fall asleep and I sleep on the ear I can hear out of, how am I going to hear a baby cry? It was all those what if questions. And that did bring on all the anxiety. And that I would love to say that, oh yeah, after a few months I was good. No, I was not. I mean, it took me probably about 1.5 years to really come to the place where, like you were saying, I'm believing for healing. I still am. And it's been almost 10 years. And I'm doing all the things. Like if God ever prompts me to do something or go somewhere to get prayed for, I will, hands down. And I actually did that. I went to Reading, to Bethel. I can't remember how many years ago that was. It's probably been 7 or 8 years ago now, maybe 8 years ago. And such a cool experience. And there was things that I did experience there. I didn't get my hearing back, but there were other things that I experienced there that I would have never experienced apart from that.
Yeah.
So I think of it as I am always hopeful. I am always praying. I am 100% full of faith and believing, but I refuse to wake up every day and go back through, what if God doesn't heal me? What if I do struggle with this? What if I feel fearful? Like, what do I do with that? And I think that, again, it's just a shift in perspective of like, what am I putting my energy to?
Yeah.
Because there's not a lot of nights that I don't go to sleep thinking, oh gosh, like Aaron was just traveling this weekend. And I'm like, okay, David's upstairs. I have a dog that'll bark if something happens.
Something happens.
But it's real life stuff.
Lauren, we're making plans, right? We're making plans just in case.
I
mean, tell you guys, we got it. We got it. We are making the plans.
But it is one of those things where I think it's awesome when God heals people. I think it's awesome to hear testimonies of, I went through infertility and then God gave me a baby. But also, what do you do when you don't experience those things that you're believing for?
Well, and your life is still such a huge testimony and story of what God's doing in it. I mean, He made us so like you walking through that. I tell so many people younger, like going up, I'm like, what you're struggling with now, God doesn't waste pain.
Right.
So it is to be used for His glory, but it's and to bless other people, because there's going to be other people going through these things, and they're going to need those people. This morning, matter of fact, I had an autoimmune flare up this week, and this morning I was getting ready. I was putting on my makeup, and my husband came in, and he came in and said, "I was just praying for you." And if you don't, like, a lot of times the enemy wants you to be silent in your pain, going, people are tired of praying for that.
Yeah.
Blah, 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 blah. And I'm sorry I'm getting emotional, guys, but because you need other people praying for you. And it's not that our prayers don't matter, but we do need the body. And we do need people speaking life and interceding. And I appreciate intercessors so much because they are led by the Spirit. There was a question in this book that I've been reading called Now and Not Yet. and I mentioned it in the last episode, in this one paragraph, I mean, she asked this question, and I'm like, trying to swallow as I read it. But anyway, it says, could your present desert serve to root out every form of self-reliance so that you might hunger for him more than ease? Is it helping you thirst for the water of the word rather than a self-made oasis you might otherwise turn to?
Wow.
If God's heart is to be our God and for us to be his people, he will stop at nothing to draw us to himself right now, because he is preparing us for so much more. And when I read that, she has a little truth to press into. So I'm like, and I love that, because you can just kind of like get this, like, okay, wrap this up. It says, God uses the desert not to harm us, but to form us.
I fully believe that.
And forming is a form of maturing. And I think so many times I'm like, God, I'm in my 50s. Can we just be done with this maturing thing? I mean, come on. But
Can we get to the end of this journey?
Yeah, I mean, look, let's just have fun for the rest of my life and let my life be ease. But it's just to be reminded that some of you are like going through like really serious situations right now in your life. Maybe you're in a broken marriage. And I think that so much. And that's what I'm so thankful for, because there's so many things in my life that I want God to fix, but there are so many things in my life that are a constant work in progress, like marriage. But I'm so appreciative that I can say I'm thankful that my husband prays for me. And I know that that's not like common, so I'm not taking it for granted, but I know that there's been seasons where people are like, I wish I had a husband that prayed for me, or I wish I had. But there are portions in people's lives that we all can look to and go, gosh, I wish I had that situation. But it will steal your joy. And so, being in the no and the rejections and being disappointed, that's what the enemy will do. I heard someone say once, and I've never really thought about influencers this way, because they're a dime a dozen, and I love them. I mean, this is how they do their job, and they're awesome. But
Swipe up.
I know. I mean, they just get you. They just know what
Here's
to
a
do.
link.
They know what to do. And so in the whole process, man, I just had a menopausal moment. I just forgot what I was talking about.
Oh, it was something about influencers. What was it?
Oh, yes. Thank you. See, this is why I need Lauren in my life, because she is my brain that I've lost. No,
I only got half of mine left today. So.
Oh, gosh. But no, the guy was talking about that we are the biggest influencers in our own life.
Wow.
I was like, wait a minute, let me read that again. And what he was saying is we talk to ourselves way more than anybody else talks to us.
That's true.
So when we're rethinking things or we're playing that reel over, like, what are we actually saying to ourselves? And there is power in that. And I thought, that is true. Like, who can influence Gina the most is Gina.
Yeah.
And then I lean into others in wisdom and body of Christ to confirm and affirm the things that God has already said many times, but also he course corrects through other people because he uses their voice as a guide. And I mean, coming out of our, series that we're in, the Holy Spirit, I mean, I love knowing that is how we're empowered, and how we encourage each other is by the Holy Spirit. But anyway, I just thought it was really neat. That we are the biggest influencers in our own life. Like, we can influence by what we're speaking to ourselves.
And oftentimes I've, heard it said that we wouldn't talk to somebody else the way that we would talk to ourselves.
It's true.
And, having, an inner critic, I'm like, oh my gosh, you're so right.
It's so true. It's so true.
Well, I think something else I have found is kind of like Paul talking about the thorn in his flesh and his side, and it being that thing that, yes, God could deliver him from, but it also is the thing that keeps him so dependent upon him. And when you were talking about the, self-made oasis, I know for myself, even though I'm still pursuing and looking forward to physical healing, whether it's on this side of heaven or the other side of heaven, there have been other things that God has used along the way to heal me in different ways, like just from the way I think and a lot of different facets of it. So when we're believing for healing and we're believing for miracles, yes, I think what most people see on the surface level is, well, you haven't physically been healed. And my challenge to myself and all of us would just be, well, what are the other areas that God has healed you in? And just from my own personal walk with losing my hearing, yes, can I only hear out of one ear? Yeah, I can. But it now being almost 10 years, I've never been able to hear God's voice clearer.
Yeah.
And I think that's one thing that if somebody would have told me that 10 years ago and said, hey, you're getting ready to walk through this, but you will be able to hear God clear, I don't know that I would have signed up for it.
No.
But those are the things that if I'm spending my energy and my thoughts on what I haven't gotten yet or what I haven't received healing for yet, I'll miss everything else that God's doing. And it will do exactly like what you were saying. It steals your joy. And you miss out on all the things that God is doing.
Yeah, it really is so true. That's why I really think that journaling is so important because I think we really do forget.
I know I do. I forget what I did yesterday.
I know. and just an added thing, it is such a gift to leave others because journaling, those are just thoughts and precious moments that you've had or you remember or just saying out loud to God all the things you want to say, because our sadness and our anger, He's not going to withdraw from us.
Right.
He appreciates the rawness in us being real with him and truthful. So I hope you guys today have been encouraged a little bit. I hope more than anything that it's made you feel, that you're not alone. Mm-hmm. That you actually are very normal with some of the ways that you're probably thinking, but it really goes back to centering our lives around him, trusting him with the things that we can't control, but also reaching out, asking for prayer, being vocal about those things, but knowing that it's all going to draw us closer to him and bring us more clarity as, we mature. We do like praying for you guys. And so I know that you guys have heard us say before, but renew@opendoorchurch.com is our email. And if you do that, you can send prayer requests there. You could actually send a follow-up question. Or you actually could say, hey, Lauren and Gina, we would love to talk about this, or we would love to hear more about this. And we're open to that. And, we have guests on every month, too. And so we're looking forward to continuing to do that and sharing their lives and stories to encourage you guys. But thank you so much for joining us, and we can't wait to hear and see you next time.